conflicted inside because I can't love her back equally. What to do? I've never been fortunate when it comes to relationships. You could chalk it up to commitment issues, bad timing, or perhaps even a lack of the right kind of connection, but the reality is that none of my relationships have ever stood the test of time. The cycle has always been the same: start with hope, hit a snag, falter, and eventually fall apart. Even with her, the person who now occupies such a central space in my life, things didn't work out the first time we tried. We had dated before, back when life felt simpler, or maybe it just seemed that way because I didn't carry as much emotional baggage. It ended, as these things often do, not with some explosive argument but with a quiet understanding that something vital was missing. Then, life happened. I moved to the United States, seeking opportunities, chasing dreams that seemed just out of reach but tantalizingly possible. The distance and distractions brought new chapters into my life, none of which ended any better than the last. In the States, I found myself in another relationship. For a time, it felt like it could work, that maybe this was my chance to break the cycle. But cracks began to show. We weren't aligned, not in the ways that matter most. That relationship eventually withered away, another failed attempt at finding something lasting. Then there was the long-distance relationship with someone back home, a desperate effort to bridge the chasm of miles with late-night calls and promises. That, too, fell apart under the weight of expectations and the unrelenting passage of time. Yet, through it all, there was her. She and I never truly lost touch. Even after our relationship ended, we remained connected in ways that defied logic. It wasn't constant. Life has a way of sweeping you up in its tides, but there was always a sense of stability in knowing that she was there, that we could pick up the conversation no matter how much time had passed. She was the person I turned to when life became overwhelming, and I suspect she felt the same about me. We shared our struggles, even when those struggles revolved around the people we were trying to build new lives with. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here we were, confiding in each other about failed relationships, while our own unresolved history lingered in the background. Her unwavering presence became a comfort I hadn't expected. When she decided to pursue higher studies in the United States, it felt natural to help her prepare. I poured hours into guiding her through the intricacies of applications, visa paperwork, and the overwhelming uncertainty of leaving everything familiar behind. I wanted her to succeed, and maybe, deep down, I wanted her to be close again, though I never allowed myself to acknowledge that fully. When she finally arrived, I felt a strange mix of emotions: pride, relief, and an inexplicable anxiety about what her presence might mean for my carefully constructed life. Then, the unthinkable happened. Barely settled into her new life, she needed a sudden surgery, something serious enough to leave her vulnerable and in need of support. Without hesitation, I stepped in. Alongside my friends, I helped nurse her back to health, staying by her side during those difficult weeks. She was fragile in a way I had never seen before, and it struck a chord in me that I couldn't quite place. I remember one night vividly. It was late, and she was resting on the couch, her face pale but peaceful. The room was quiet except for the steady hum of the heater. I sat nearby, watching her sleep, and for the first time in years, I felt something stir deep within me, a mix of protectiveness, guilt, and a faint glimmer of hope. This was the woman who had always been there, through all my missteps and failures, and here she was again, leaning on me when she needed someone most. It wasn't long after that I began to wonder if fate was giving me another chance. Was it telling me that I had overlooked something precious, something worth fighting for? Or was it a cruel twist, forcing me to confront the inadequacies I'd always tried to bury? Whatever the answer, I knew one thing: her presence in my life had become undeniable. Seeing her again after so long, something shifted in me. There she was, not just a memory or a comforting voice on the other side of a phone call, but a tangible presence in my life again. It felt as if the universe was presenting me with a chance to rewrite our story, one I had thought was over. The thought gnawed at me. This person, this woman, loves me so deeply and so completely. How many people ever find that kind of love? It felt unwise, no, foolish not to give it another shot, to not at least try to see where it could go. Back home, this wouldn't have even been an option. Living together before marriage would have been unthinkable, a scandal in our communities that neither of our families would forgive. But here, in the United States, things were different. We were away from the prying eyes of tradition and societal expectations, free to navigate our relationship on our own terms. The idea of sharing a home, of building something together, seemed almost liberating. For the first time, it felt like we could approach this relationship with no constraints, no rules but our own. So, we did it. We moved in together. The initial days were filled with a strange kind of warmth. There was a comfort in her presence that I hadn't felt in years, a sense of stability I'd never known in any other relationship. She had a way of turning a space into a home, of filling it with laughter and light. I began to think that maybe this was what I had been missing all along, that maybe the spark I'd always been chasing wasn't what love was supposed to feel like. Maybe love wasn't fireworks and passion but something quieter, steadier, like the way she brought me tea when I worked late or the way she hummed softly to herself while cooking. But as the months went by, that comfort gave way to a gnawing unease. It wasn't her, she was everything anyone could hope for in a partner. It was me. I couldn't ignore the growing realization that my feelings for her, as genuine as they were, would never match hers for me. Her love for me was boundless, a reservoir so deep that I couldn't see the bottom. And mine? Mine felt like a shallow pool by comparison, something that barely covered the surface. This imbalance began to eat at me. Every day, I saw her love manifest in ways big and small. She dreamed out loud, painting vivid pictures of a future together, a house, a marriage, children. She spoke of building a life here, of growing old side by side. And as she spoke, I felt a growing sense of dread, because while her dreams were vivid and certain, mine were foggy and fragmented. My focus was elsewhere, on my career, on figuring out my visa situation, on securing some kind of stability in a life that still felt precarious. How could I promise her a future when I wasn't even sure of my own? And then, there was the weight of our shared history, our roots, and the worlds we came from. Back home, our relationship would be seen as impossible, not because of who we were as people but because of who we were expected to be. Our religions, our cultures, our families, none of them aligned. In Bengali culture, love often takes a back seat to duty, to tradition, to the expectations of the community. And the thought of going against those expectations, of disappointing the people who had shaped me, was almost unbearable. I couldn't stop imagining the fallout. My parents, proud, steadfast in their beliefs, would be heartbroken. They had spent their lives sacrificing for me, building a future they thought I would carry forward, and I could already see the pain in their eyes if they knew what I was doing. Their son, defying everything they held sacred for a love that they would never understand. The thought of causing them that kind of hurt was paralyzing. And yet, I couldn't shake the guilt I felt toward her. She had built her life around me, placed her faith in me, and I couldn't bear the thought of letting her down. She believed in a future for us, even when I doubted it myself. She would say things that cut straight to the core of my conflict about how easy it would be for me, as a man, to move on, to marry someone else and build a life without her. But for me, she would say, her voice trembling, I can't do that. I'll be alone forever. I'll die alone. Her words haunted me. Was I condemning her to a life of loneliness by staying with her without being able to give her the love she deserved? Or was I dooming her just as surely by breaking up with her, leaving her devastated in a foreign land where she had no one else? I couldn't decide which was worse, and so I remained paralyzed, trapped in a limbo of my own making. It felt like I was being torn in two. On one side, there was the weight of tradition, of duty, of the life I had always envisioned for myself but never truly defined. On the other, there was her, the person who had stood by me through everything, whose love was unwavering even as mine faltered. And in the middle, there was me, drowning in the conflict of wanting to do right by everyone but knowing I couldn't. Every moment spent with her was a reminder of what I couldn't give her, and every moment spent away from her was a reminder of how much she meant to me. The contradictions were endless, and I had no idea how to resolve them. I told her everything, every hesitation, every fear, every doubt that churned inside me. I told her how unbalanced our love felt, how I feared I could never give her back even a fraction of what she poured into me. I told her about the weight of my responsibilities, my uncertainties about the future, and the crushing societal expectations that made everything so complicated. I tried to explain that it wasn't just about us, it was about the world we were a part of and the consequences we couldn't escape. Her reaction shattered me. She listened quietly, her face unreadable, but her eyes betrayed the storm inside her. When she finally spoke, her words were heavy with heartbreak and resignation. "You're a man," she said, her voice calm but trembling just beneath the surface. "It's easier for you. You can move on. You can marry someone else, build a new life, and be happy. But for me..." Her voice cracked, and she looked away as tears began to fall. "I won't be able to. I'll die alone. That's what you're leaving me with." Her words cut deeper than I expected. They echoed in my mind, growing louder with each passing day, until they became almost unbearable. I hated the image of her alone, lost, and unloved because of me. And yet, what was I supposed to do? Was it better to stay with her, knowing I couldn't give her the life she deserved, or to let her go and risk leaving her to the loneliness she feared? Either way, I felt like the villain in her story, the one responsible for ruining her life. The weight of her words didn't just sit with me, it consumed me. It played out in every moment we spent together. When we laughed, I thought about how I might someday take that joy away from her. When she reached for my hand, I thought about how one day, I might pull mine back for the last time. And when she looked at me with love in her eyes, I thought about how I didn't deserve it. We got along well on the surface, at least. We shared routines, inside jokes, and the kind of quiet companionship that comes from living under the same roof. But underneath it all, I was restless. I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was missing, that our relationship lacked the sparks and fire that I had always imagined love should have. It wasn't that she wasn't enough, it was that I wasn't enough. My love for her was real, but it didn't set my heart ablaze. It didn't leave me breathless or make me feel whole in the way I thought love was supposed to. I started to wonder if those sparks were something I would ever find. Maybe I was chasing a fantasy, something that didn't exist outside of movies and novels. Maybe the love she gave me, the steady, unwavering kind, was the only real kind of love there was, and I was too foolish to appreciate it. But then another thought crept in, one I couldn't shake. What if those sparks did exist? What if there was someone out there who could make me feel the way I longed to feel? Someone who would ignite a fire in me and make me forget all my doubts? The thought was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. What if I left her, only to realize I was wrong? What if I spent the rest of my life searching for something that didn't exist? Or worse, what if I found it, but it came at the cost of losing her, the one person who had always been there for me? The fear of making the wrong choice paralyzed me. And then there was the cruelest possibility of all. What if I ended up alone? What if I let her go, hoping to find someone who would make me feel complete, only to discover that no one else could love me the way she did? What if I spent my life chasing a dream, only to wake up one day and realize that I had thrown away the best thing I ever had? These thoughts warred inside me, leaving me conflicted and unsure. Every time I tried to imagine a future with her, the weight of my doubts overshadowed the happiness she brought. But every time I imagined a future without her, the emptiness was unbearable. The conflict was relentless. I couldn't stand the thought of breaking her heart, of being the reason she suffered. And yet, I couldn't ignore the feeling that staying with her would be its own kind of cruelty, a slow, quiet erosion of her dreams and mine. I felt trapped between my fear of hurting her and my fear of living a life that felt incomplete. Her love was a gift, one I didn't deserve, But it was also a mirror, reflecting all the ways I had failed her and myself. And as much as I wanted to be the man she saw in me, the truth was undeniable: I didn't know if I could be.